What would you do if you discovered that, at the heart of the Catholic Church, there are rituals so dark, so dangerous, that they were banned forever and hidden beneath layers of impenetrable secrets? The faith we know might hide a much darker side than we ever imagined. Welcome to Unholy Secrets, the channel where we dive deep into the most controversial mysteries of the Catholic Church. Here, we reveal secrets that challenge the official narratives and make us question what we know about faith, power, and mystery. Today, we will uncover the forbidden side of religion, the rituals that the Church itself tried to erase from history. Since its foundation, the Catholic Church has been a powerful force in world history, shaping societies, controlling narratives, and determining what is permitted and what must be condemned. But what few know is that throughout this journey, dark practices and strange ceremonies have emerged from the shadows. Some of these practices were considered so dangerous or controversial that the Church banned them, and in many cases tried to eliminate them from any historical record. These forbidden rituals are a window into the internal conflicts of the faith itself. From extreme exorcisms that got out of control to consecration ceremonies deemed heretical, and even rituals associated with dark forces, these stories reveal a hidden and disturbing side of religion. Why did the Church decide to ban them? Were they truly dangerous, or did they simply challenge the authority of the institution? As you explore these rituals, you will see that the line between the sacred and the profane, between light and darkness, is much thinner than it seems. Prepare to hear stories that blend faith, mystery, and the inexplicable. Stories that may have been buried because they revealed too much about the hidden side of the Church. So if you're ready for this dark journey, stay with me until the end and discover the forbidden rituals of the Catholic Church, the dark side of faith. What you hear today may forever change the way you see the Church and its mysteries. Exorcisms have always been surrounded by mystery, fear, and fascination. Within the Catholic Church, the exorcism ritual is one of the oldest practices, intended to expel demons and free souls tormented by evil. However, the exorcism we know today has undergone numerous changes over the centuries. The original version, practiced in the early days of Christianity, was so intense and disturbing that it was eventually reformed and, in part, prohibited. The original ritual, described in historical texts, was a brutal experience. Unlike today, where prayers and the spiritual strength of the priest are the main instruments, the original exorcism included extreme physical and psychological methods. The goal was not only to expel the demon, but also to purify the possessed, even if it meant pushing them to the limit of human endurance. The possessed person was often tied up, deprived of food and water for days, while prayers, psalms, and chants echoed ceaselessly. In some accounts, the ritual involved the use of sacred objects in almost violent ways, such as crucifixes pressed against the skin, or the forced insertion of holy water into the person's mouth. On other occasions, even more controversial practices, like light slaps or immersions in cold water, were used to awaken the evil spirit and force it to manifest. These methods, though seen by some as necessary, often left the possessed physically and mentally devastated. A notable example is the case of Gaius, a young man from the 3rd century. Gaius underwent an exorcism that lasted more than 3 days, with only brief intervals. During the ritual, the young man screamed in unknown tongues, convulsed, and even showed marks on his body that the exorcists interpreted as signs of the demonic presence. He was tied to an altar while priests endlessly sang psalms and issued commands to the evil spirit. At the end of the 3rd day, the priests reported that the demon was expelled, but Gaius never regained his physical or mental health. Over the centuries, the Church began to moderate the practice. During the Middle Ages, the original ritual was revised to avoid accusations of brutality. In 1614, the Ritual Romanum was introduced as the official and safe version of the exorcism, prohibiting violent methods. Even so, stories of priests who refused to abandon the original rite continued to surface, especially in rural and remote areas where ancient practices endured longer. An intriguing detail is that the Vatican has never fully revealed the reasons for modifying the original ritual. Was it really to protect the possessed, or to avoid extreme cases causing controversies and tarnishing the Church's image? This decision remains shrouded in mystery, fueling theories that the original methods were as effective as they were dangerous. Although exorcism is still officially practiced, the extreme versions have been relegated to the past. But were they truly abandoned? Some exorcist priests claim that, in severe cases, they still secretly use elements of the old ritual. This leads us to question, how far would the Church go to hide the brutal side of its battle against evil? And more disturbingly, are even darker rituals still being performed in the shadows? Canonization, the process by which the Catholic Church declares an individual a saint, is surrounded by symbolism and reverence. Today, it is a highly organized rite, with clear rules and detailed investigations to prove miracles and virtues. However, what few know is that, in its origins, the canonization rituals included mysterious and controversial practices that were eventually abandoned or prohibited by the Church over the centuries. These rituals, performed in the shadows of the altar, raise more questions than answers about the true purpose of sainthood. In the early days of Christianity, canonization was a communal and almost mystical process. Sainthood was not formalized by documents and papal approval, but by divine signs perceived by those around the deceased. Many believed that the body of the candidate for sainthood possessed miraculous properties, and thus exhumations became a fundamental part of the rituals. This is where one of the darkest aspects of early canonization comes in. The mortal remains were examined for signs of sainthood, such as incorrupt bodies, floral fragrances emanating from the bones, or inexplicable marks on the corpse. Some historical accounts, like those of Saint Cuthbert in the 7th century, describe extraordinary events during these exhumations. It is said that years after his death, Cuthbert's body was found completely intact and exhaling a sweet smell. This miracle was seen as direct evidence of his sainthood. However, not all cases were as miraculous. In many instances, the absence of divine signs caused the process to take a more unsettling turn. The canonization rituals sometimes involved secret ceremonies held at midnight, where monks and clergy performed specific prayers over the mortal remains, asking for divine intervention. In extreme cases, symbolic practices such as placing the bones in contact with sacred relics or conducting strict fasts around the body were carried out in the hope of provoking a late miracle. These acts, seen as desperate, raised questions within the Church itself. Were they truly acts of faith or mere human artifices to force the sacred? From the 12th century onward, with the centralization of the Church's power in Rome, the Vatican began to take full control over the canonization process. Many of these practices, especially the exhumations and the nocturnal rituals, were abolished as they were considered inappropriate or heretical. However, evidence suggests that some monastic communities continued to perform these rites in secret, defying papal guidelines. One of the most controversial stories involves a candidate for sainthood in the 14th century. Confidential documents reveal that monks, dissatisfied with the lack of divine signs on the candidate's body, staged a false miracle by spreading scented oils on the corpse to simulate the smell of holiness. When the Vatican discovered the fraud, it not only prohibited the involved parties from participating in other canonization processes, but also strengthened the rules, making them more stringent. These mysterious rituals make us reflect. How many saints canonized in ancient times had their sainthood legitimized by obscure or fabricated practices? And more importantly, are these forbidden ceremonies still secretly performed by groups that challenge the Church's authority? Canonization, which should reflect divine light, also has its shadow, a shadow that may never be fully illuminated. Within Catholicism, consecration is one of the most sacred moments, an act in which objects, places, and even people are dedicated to divine service. However, behind the Church's official ritual, There are reports of alternative practices that challenge tradition and raise suspicions about what truly happens in the shadows. These alternative consecrations not only stray from the Vatican's guidelines, but also carry mysterious and sometimes disturbing elements that many prefer to keep hidden. One of the most intriguing aspects of these practices is the so-called reverse consecration. Historical documents suggest that, in times of crisis or persecution, some clergy resorted to alternative rites to ensure divine protection. These secret ceremonies involved unusual symbols and even the use of apocryphal texts rejected by the official church. Instead of using only the sacred words of the Bible, the priests recited obscure prayers, often derived from local traditions mixed with Christianity. These texts promised more immediate power, capable of protecting communities from evil. Darker accounts also surround what became known as blood consecration. This alternative ritual is said to have emerged during the Middle Ages, when plague and wars ravaged Europe. Desperate priests supposedly consecrated altars or sacred objects using blood, believing this would intensify the spiritual bond with the divine. Some legends tell of this blood being taken from martyrs or volunteers who saw the sacrifice as an act of faith. Although the Church condemns any act involving blood in rituals, these practices seem to have persisted in isolated communities. Another example is the consecration of remote places, such as caves, forests, or abandoned ruins. While the Church always favored the consecration of cathedrals and formal spaces, certain monastic orders chose clandestine shrines away from public view. These places were consecrated through unorthodox rituals, including the use of specific herbs, chants in archaic Latin, and even the burning of personal objects as offerings. One of the most controversial cases occurred in the 15th century, when a small chapel in France was consecrated by a local priest using methods that included reading from an apocryphal scroll. The location attracted worshippers after rumors of miracles, but when the Vatican learned of the practices used, the chapel was closed and the priest was excommunicated. However, the site continued to attract devotees, suggesting that the power of alternative consecration, whether true or fabricated, had an undeniable appeal. These practices, while largely rejected by the official church, raise profound questions. How far does the line between faith and heresy go? Could these alternative consecrations be forms of rebellion against the church's control, or a reflection of human desperation to connect with the divine at any cost? More disturbingly, do such rituals still persist, hidden in the shadows? In the vast history of the Catholic Church, few events are as shrouded in mystery and controversy as the so-called Synod of Darkness. Although the Church has never officially recognized its existence, historical accounts and apocryphal documents suggest that, during times of deep crisis and internal disputes, powerful figures within the Catholic hierarchy conducted a secret and forbidden ritual intended to summon supernatural forces to consolidate their authority. The name Synod of Darkness refers to clandestine meetings held at night, away from the eyes of ordinary clergy and the public. Unlike traditional synods, which were gatherings to discuss theological or administrative matters, the purpose of this ritual was entirely different: to seek hidden power, often associated with ancestral knowledge or even pacts with forces considered heretical. Accounts from medieval chroniclers, usually hidden in private libraries, describe one of these supposed rituals occurring in the 9th century during a period of intense political and religious instability. The Church was facing internal divisions, and certain factions sought to secure their dominance at any cost. It is said that, on a moonless night, bishops and other high-ranking members gathered in an abandoned cathedral. There, instead of the usual prayers to God, inverted Latin chants were allegedly sung, accompanied by animal sacrifices. Sacred relics, such as chalices and crucifixes, were supposedly used in inverted ways, blending Christian faith elements with ancient rituals. One of the most terrifying aspects of the Synod of Darkness was the alleged invocation of supernatural entities. The participants believed that these forces could grant protection, knowledge, and victory over their enemies. In certain accounts, the clerics sought direct answers from spirits considered fallen, asking for advice or even favors in exchange for obedience and devotion. Some historians argue that these practices were nothing more than myths created to slander powerful figures. For others, there are indications that certain clergymen, seduced by ambition, truly ventured into these dark practices. A particularly famous case involves Pope John XIII, who ruled from 955 to 964. Accused of corruption, blasphemy, and shady alliances, he was the subject of rumors that he may have participated in something akin to a synod of darkness, seeking spiritual aid to strengthen his throne. While these claims are difficult to prove, John XIII's legacy continues to fuel speculation about the true extent of these gatherings. The Church has always rushed to discredit any mention of the Synod of Darkness, dismissing such stories as works of fiction or heresy. However, the Vatican's silence on these episodes only fuels theories that something dark truly occurred in the shadows. And if these secret meetings were real, the most disturbing question is, how far could the quest for power drive even the most devout to betray their faith? Within the silent corridors of the Vatican, there are documents that remain inaccessible to the public and often even to most members of the clergy. What do these secret records contain? And why are so many crucial documents kept out of reach, with many even prohibited for study? The existence of these secret files within the Catholic Church has generated immense curiosity over the centuries, and rightfully so. Many believe they hold uncomfortable truths, evidence of unsolved mysteries, and even scandals that could shake the very foundation of the Church. Among the most notorious of these documents are the Acta Apostolicae Sedis, official Vatican records that, in certain situations, have been kept under absolute secrecy. Some of these records in particular deal with extremely controversial issues, such as heresy, witchcraft, and even pacts with supernatural forces. During the Inquisition, the Vatican kept detailed files on witch and heretic trials for years, many of which were never made public. It is not uncommon to hear stories of a secret papacy, where supposed agreements with political factions or esoteric organizations were discussed confidentially. Another relevant example is the Papal Prohibitions, a set of decrees and secret documents that were issued to suppress movements of thought or religious practices considered subversive. At the end of the Middle Ages and during the Renaissance, when the Vatican feared losing control over the masses, many texts and books were officially banned, including treatises on alchemy, astrology, and even literature deemed dangerous to public morals. Among the most famous is the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, a list that kept books and writings by philosophers, scientists, and theologians who opposed the Church's official view under censorship. The justification for the secrecy of so many documents has always been to protect the doctrine and integrity of the Church. However, the obscurity surrounding these files raises questions. What is really being hidden from the world? What truths does the Vatican fear revealing? And more importantly, what secrets do these prohibitions still keep in the shadows? What we know about the Catholic Church and its secret rituals is merely the tip of the iceberg of a mystery that lies deep within history and faith. The organization, which presents itself as a bastion of purity and truth, carries in its shadows practices that many would prefer to keep hidden. From forbidden rituals to secret documents, through mysterious acts of consecration and synods held at midnight, the Church's history is full of gaps and voids that, when opened, reveal more than just devotion. When investigating these hidden practices, an inevitable question arises. To what extent does the Catholic Church really control the historical and spiritual narrative that is passed down to us? Are these practices, often associated with occult power and supernatural control, a reflection of the relentless pursuit of divine authority? Or are they another example of corruption and abuse of power within the sacred structures themselves? The shadows of the Catholic Church may be darker than we imagine, and the veil of holiness often conceals a much more complex reality. With each secret that comes to light, there is an increasing need to question, to investigate, and above all, to understand the true role these mysteries play within the Church. This is not merely a search for curiosity, but an attempt to illuminate the dark areas of an institution that, for centuries, has shaped the faith and morality of millions around the world. In the end, as we look at these mysteries, we are challenged to reflect. To what extent are we willing to accept what is told to us without questioning what remains in the shadows? What is being hidden and why? Every answer we find seems only to open the door to more questions, revealing an endless path of discoveries and, perhaps, even more secrets yet to be unveiled. If you found this video intriguing and disturbing, like, comment, and share. Subscribe to the channel to continue uncovering the hidden mysteries of the Church and the issues that shape our destiny. And don't miss our next video, which is appearing on your screen. See you next time.